Thanks, Jacob, and thanks, Robbie. And I think today's about acknowledging the truth, and we've got to start with acknowledging a fundamental truth in Australia, which is that Australia's first peoples, the Indigenous people, have never ceded sovereignty over this land, and it's something that we as a country have got to come to grips with sooner or later. And until we do, we're never going to heal the injustice that those people suffered a couple of hundred years ago and continue to suffer. And so I want to thank Robbie for his welcome to country and his spirited words, and acknowledge that it's something we've all got to do to march side by side to have true justice in this country. Now I can hear people saying speak louder. I think I'm speaking as loud as I can, so there's a bit of space up here, so if people want to bunch in and get a bit warmer and come out of the rain, that'd be great. Look, it's just a shameful state of affairs when an Australian citizen and journalist has to turn to the government of Ecuador for help. And Julian Assange had the misfortune of not being a 14-year-old boy who made a stupid mistake with some dope, or a lawyer who found herself in the wrong place at the wrong time representing people in a difficult situation. Because for those people, the Australian government did the right thing and did what you would hope the Australian government would do, and that is bend over backwards and use our resources to live up to the promise that it says at the front of your passport, which is that if you find yourself in trouble overseas, then the government will come to your assistance and protect your fundamental human rights. And instead, because Julian Assange had the temerity to offend some very powerful people and to expose what's been going on behind closed doors at the highest levels of government, and confirm for many of us what we feared to be the truth about the way that governments relate to their people, he hasn't had the foreign minister jumping on a plane and flying across countries to help him, and he hasn't had the Prime Minister picking up the phone and calling counterparts and urging for his assistance. Instead, he's faced people at the highest levels in this country threatening to cancel his passport. He's faced people, the Prime Minister even saying he's committed an illegal act, something that the Australian Federal Police even investigated and said wasn't the case. And he's faced senior political figures in the United States calling for him to be hunted down, and calling for him to also be put on trial where he may face life imprisonment and may face the death penalty. And when that happens, it's the obligation of our government to step in and do everything they can to ensure that an Australian citizen and a journalist has their liberty and their safety and their human rights protected to the full extent of the law. And that is all we are asking today, one equal standard to apply for everyone. Now, there are claims that Julian Assange has to meet, claims that are made against him in Sweden, but it's worth noting that for all the time he's been under house arrest in the United Kingdom, he has offered to have the Swedish prosecutors come over and question him, and said he would fully comply with that investigation. And instead, the prosecutors have declined that. And you have to wonder why, and you have to wonder whether what is being planned is for him to be taken to the United States. And that is where the government here in Australia has fallen short again. It is not good enough to simply say, we've got no information from the United States government. No. If you know that there have been calls for him to be hunted down, it is a positive obligation on the government to use the special relationship with the United States that we have to make sure that he is safe, and that at any stage, once the issues in Sweden are resolved, he can come back here home safely to Australia. And until the Australian government does that, it is failing in its obligations to protect the basic rights of every one of us. And any one of us, anyone else who has the temerity to challenge powerful people, could find themselves being next. And that is why it is important that every single one of us stand up and continue to stand up for Julian Assange. Now, we've been doing everything that we can in Parliament Assange's rights are protected. We've been trying to find out what's been going on, including through asking questions in Parliament, and including even putting in bringing motions into the Senate and putting in freedom of information requests with the government. In something that I hope that Julian Assange might find cause for a little wry smile, one of our freedom of information requests came back to us with our own motion that we put to the Senate blanked out, which I think says a lot about the way that things are unfolding at the moment, and explains why it is absolutely critical for all of you to continue to come out on balmy Melbourne days like this to stand up for him, because however much discomfort all of us might be, or any of us might be feeling being out here on a cold Melbourne day, it pales into comparison for what someone who's been a journalist and a citizen of this country and has done nothing more than expose what's been going on behind closed doors and tell the truth to the world, now finds himself locked behind closed doors and in a situation where he finds it difficult to move both politically and physically. And what we need now is the Australian government to step in and urgently ensure that once the issues in Sweden are resolved, that Julian Assange is able to come back here safely. And I'll end by saying, when he got up in court the first time and gave his address, Julian Assange gave an Australian address, he gave a Melbourne address, he gave an address here in Carlton, and that makes me his local member. And as Julian Assange's local member of Parliament, it's my obligation, and I will continue to do everything I can to make sure that, like any other citizen, he is able to enjoy safe passage back here to Australia, and that the government facilitates that. So good on you all for coming out.
Thank you.